how the pouring out of the minds and hearts of these Filipinos in America, it really dawned on me that they are very involved in the political system. But my being chismoso, uh, uh, would like I would like to ask more personal questions than political. I'm sorry
Okay.
about that. Anyway, uh, more on the more personal side, to direct Dayan Paragas. Could you tell us more about your journey, not necessarily from day one of your career as a filmmaker and as a Filipino?
Mm. Yeah, so I didn't go to film school. I started movies. I started working in the film business after I graduated from college, where I grew up in Texas, and I always loved movies, but because there were no female directors that I could look up to, it wasn't really an option for me in my mind. It wasn't something I could do. So along the way, I found myself in directing, and I early on wrote this thing, which I'm actually doing as my next film, which is about World War II in the Philippines, because my grandfather was a guerrilla in the war. But I knew that I couldn't make that because it was a very big budget thing. And then a couple of years later, after I'd been directing a little bit more, I started writing this film, Yellow Rose, and nobody wanted to make it, and I was told no by everybody, and that's not necessarily true. Actually, some people said yes if I changed the character to like a different race, the lead character, and I just didn't want to do that. And actually, that's how I became a documentary filmmaker, because it just seemed like, I guess nobody wants to hear stories I want to tell on a fiction side. And so I just pursued what I could pursue, and I started making documentaries. And I started a company in New York. And then I remember I'd made my first big documentary, was called Brooklyn Boheme, and it had Spike Lee and Chris Rock and all these sort of legendary African Americans in it. And then I was like, wait, where's my community? Where's my Filipino film? And I dug this film back up. And from that point on, I partnered with Cecilia Mejia, who was our producer, and she was working with the Filipino Legal Defense Fund, and like together we just also got a lot of no's, but I just wouldn't give up. And because I had some experience directing at that point, I just wouldn't give up. Because there was no Filipino film released by a major studio. And all that time I was waiting to tell this story. And I'm proud to say this film is the first film released by a major Hollywood studio that has a Filipino lead and a Filipino director, that's for the United States release. So it was a long journey, but I think it was definitely worth it.
Okay, could you tell
We
us?
are the second largest Asian population in the United States, and we have virtually invisible. You never see Filipino characters anywhere. So it was very important to me that I tell a Filipino story, a Filipino American story.
Yeah. Could you tell us more about your Filipino roots here in the Philippines?
Sure. I mean, my mom grew up in Manila, and my dad grew up in Baguio. They actually met in medical school in the States. They're both doctors. So that's how they met, ironically enough. And then I think my mom didn't even know that my dad was Filipino. She thought he was Japanese, something like that. But that's my parents' story. And then we ended up in Texas, in a small town in Texas, really because we were fleeing martial law. They went back to the Philippines, and we were going to live there. And then martial law, and then, it got worse and worse. And then we ended up in a small town in Texas because my dad had a colleague in medical school that wanted to start, was able to petition us. And the school he was starting the medical school in was in Lubbock, Texas. And so here's my big city mom. And we're like, we're going to Lubbock, Texas. And then we ended up in this place called Lubbock, which sounds like armpit in Tagalog. And it was pretty much that.
Okay. You have mentioned earlier that you have worked here in the Philippines as a director.
No, a little bit. I lived in Hong Kong at one point, and I was just starting out directing, and I was directing on a show called Living Asia, which was for Discovery Channel, and the host of that show was Miss Leia Salonga. So she was one of the first
Oh, okay.
people I directed, but it was a very short time. And then the next time I shot in the Philippines was with Princess, when we shot our scenes in the Philippines, which was, the very last thing we shot for the movie.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very
That's when
much.
I was called direct.
Direct. Thank you very much. My next question is for Princess. Hi, Princess.
Hi, Kuya Eugene.
Long time no see. Could you tell us more about your current life there in America?
Well, I am now a registered nurse. Although, since nag-start po yung pandemic, I couldn't really work because wala pong yaya dito sa Amerika. Kaya, since my daughter can't go to school, I have to stay with her and homeschool her. Yun, so nakatali ako sa kanya ngayon. So, nandito lang ako sa bahay. And life is very different. Very different from the way I lived my life in the Philippines. But no regrets. I'm very happy with my husband and my daughter. And I'm having the best of both worlds. Kasi before, ang mindset ko was, if I wanted to be an artist, if I wanted to be creative, uuwi lang ako ng Pilipinas para maibigay yung hilig ko sa arts. And I will live a normal life, normal family life dito sa Amerika. But because of Yellow Rose, si Diane ang nagbigay sa akin ng idea, bakit nga ba hindi ako mag-artista dito sa Amerika? So doon na nagsimula. Kaya ako ngayon, eto na, nag-aartista na rin ako dito sa Amerika.
We're very proud of you. Sino naman yung mga nami-miss mo dito sa Philippines na mga kaibigan mo na artista rin?
Marami! Unang-una na sila Pop, si Joy Ortega, si Laika Ugarte, ang dami, ang hirap magbigay ng pangalan dahil ang dami-dami kong kaibigan na artista dyan sa Pilipinas. So, ang hirap dahil like kunyari pag nagbabakasyon ako dyan, hindi ko makita lahat ng mga tao kasi kailangan isa-isa, hindi pwedeng sama-sama. Gusto ko yung quality time ba na para magkakwentuhan, magka-updatean kami tungkol sa mga personal na buhay. Pero yun ang isang nami-miss ko sa Pilipinas, yung connection sa mga kaibigan dyan.
Pero you don't communicate either through Facebook or any communication?
For sure, sa Facebook, Instagram, Viber, I'm still in close contact with all my friends. Yun nga lang, iba yung personal na harap-harapan kayong magkakausap at sharing a meal. Yun ang namimiss ko na sa Pilipinas, ang dali-dali, before pandemic. Pag nasa Pilipinas ka, ang dali nung tawagan. Ano, kita tayo dito sa ganitong restaurant. Mamaya, sige, ngayon na. Okay. Ganun ba? Hindi ko na pwedeng gawin yun ngayon.
Yeah, okay. Congratulations sa iyong bagong career and we hope to see you more in the movies.
Salamat po.
Yeah, thank you. And my last question, of course, is for Eva. I've been dreaming of talking to you since I saw you in BBC with Leia Salonga, and I want to know your roots here in the Philippines.
My roots?
Yeah. Your
Okay,
dad,
listen.
your
I'm not
dad.
gonna say this. I'm not gonna pronounce these right. Okay.
Okay.
My Lola was from UPI. What is this?
UPI?
It's in the island of Mindanao. Mindanao.
Okay.
No, anybody?
UPI, I don't know.
And then my papa was from. I don't know how to say this.
You mentioned Bacolod.
Iloilo.
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 Iloilo. Okay, yes. But
Yes.
they were, and then they moved together when they got married to Bacolod.
Okay.
And then my papa fought in. My papa was a soldier and he sent my Lola and my father, who is the oldest of three, to America. So my dad was born in Guam.
Okay.
Yes. And so he sent my Lola and my dad, who had just been born, and she was pregnant with my uncle, and they moved to San Diego, California, and my papa would send money to them for months and months and months, and then he finally joined them after the war was done, after he was done, whatever. But I don't know how to say it. Upi, and in the island of Mindanao.
Mindanao. That's Mindanao.
Mindanao.
Maybe that's
Yes, so-
Upil or something.
UPI, I think UPI. She just said UPI. But see, I knew you were gonna ask that because I looked it up.
Oh,
I looked at my last message from my Lola, who said this is where we were from, because I said I have a feeling he'll ask me, and I want to make sure I have an answer.
oh, but you know the name of your Lola.
Josefina, Kalud Noblezada, and then my papa's name is Ephraim Noblezada.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you're comfortable talking about your current life.
Why would I not be comfortable? I talk about anything with you.
Okay.
What do you want to know?
About your love life. I've read somewhere that you have a second partner now. Could you talk about him?
My second partner? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll talk about he is the most, to me, he is the sun to me.
Okay.
He is the most wonderful human in the world, and he has launched his own company making effects pedals for guitars. So in this pandemic, he's taught himself how to solder, or how to solder, how to make circuit boards and engineer. And he launched his business a month and a half ago. He's already sold 90 pedals.
Wow.
Mhm.
Like, he is not only a genius, but he is an incredible musician, an incredible artist, and he is the most kind, loving, respectful gentleman that I've had the pleasure of even knowing. Seriously, he is the sun to me. And he is my soulmate, my twin flame, and he is the best thing in the world. So I'm very grateful. I can't even picture my life without having even met him and been graced by his presence. And I know I talk him up a lot, but if you meet him for even 2 seconds, Diane knows. You meet him for even 2 seconds and you know that he's a very incredible human being.
Yeah. He also sings well.
Yes, well, he was in Hadestown with me, the musical I was in before the pandemic hit on Broadway that won the Tony for Best Musical.
Mm-hmm.
He was the lead with that, in
Wow.
that with me.
Wow.
He was my lover on stage and off stage, if that's what you're doing.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Eva, and that's very enlightening. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Now we're down to our last 3 questions.